The human mind has a remarkable capacity for forgetting fear. We remember the facts of traumatic events, the where, the when, the what. But the visceral, gut-churning terror, the way it makes your saliva taste like metal, and your skin feel 2 sizes too small, that fades. At least it's supposed to. For me, it never did. My name is Leo, and 20 years later, I can still feel the cold of that basement floor seeping through my jeans, and I can still hear the wet, dragging sound of my brother's footsteps overhead. It was the summer of 2003 in the sleepy, sun-bleached town of Cedar Fork. I was 12, my brother Sam was 14, and our world was defined by the boundaries of our neighborhood, the creek at the south end, the old Miller place to the north, and the endless humid days that stretched between. Our parents were perpetually busy, leaving us to our own devices, which usually meant inventing increasingly elaborate games. That summer it was hide and seek, but not the childish version. We played in the dark, with flashlights, and we played for keeps. The catalyst for our descent was the arrival of a new kid, Mark. He was a year older than Sam, pale and quiet, with eyes that seemed too old for his face. He'd moved into the old Victorian on Hemlock Street, a house the neighborhood kids had long ago declared haunted. He didn't try to make friends, which of course made him instantly fascinating to us. One evening, as we loitered by the rusted-out swing set in the park, Sam, emboldened by boredom and a sense of invincibility, called out to him, "Hey, you, think you're too good for us?" Mark stopped and turned, his expression unreadable. "No." "Then prove it," Sam challenged, a familiar glint in his eye. "We're playing hide and seek, after dark, in the houses that are off limits." He meant the houses our parents had explicitly warned us about. The Miller place, which was abandoned after Old Man Miller died and was rumored to be full of his strange collections. The Henderson house, which had a supposedly unfinished, unsafe basement. And now, Mark's own house. Mark studied us for a long moment. "There's a different way to play," he said, his voice low. "A better way. But you have to follow the rules." "What rules?" I asked, my voice squeaking slightly. He laid them out, his tone flat and serious, as if reciting a sacred text. "Rule 1. You only play with 3 people. 1 hider, 1 seeker, and 1 witness. Rule 2. You play at midnight. Exactly. Rule 3. You use a specific counting method. The seeker stands in the chosen center room, closes their eyes, and counts backwards from 100 by prime numbers, 97, 89, 83, and so on. Rule 4. The hider must find a place where they cannot see any light from the outside, no streetlights, no moon. Rule 5. The game is over when the hider is found, or when the seeker gives up. But you can only give up by saying, 'I forfeit the game' 3 times, clearly into the silence. And the final rule," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "Rule 6. You never ever play alone, and you never play in the same place twice." It was absurd. It was theatrical. It was the most exciting thing we'd ever heard. Sam, of course, agreed immediately. I was terrified. But the fear was a drug, and I was already hooked. We decided to break ourselves in gently. Our first game was in the Henderson house basement. My parents had forbidden us from going there because the stairs were rickety and the floor was supposedly unstable. At 11:55 p.m., we met outside. The house was a dark silhouette against a starry sky. Mark handed us each a small, cheap flashlight. "I'll be the first seeker," he said. "Sam, you hide. Leo, you're the witness. Your job is to watch. Just watch." We crept inside. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and mildew. Mark led us to the center of the basement, a large open space cluttered with forgotten furniture draped in white sheets. They looked like ghosts in the beam of our flashlights. "This is the heart," Mark said. He stood in the very center, closed his eyes, and began to count. 97, 93, 89. His voice was a monotone, devoid of any childish playfulness. It was a ritual. Sam gave me a wide-eyed, excited grin and darted off into the deeper darkness behind the furnace. I found a perch on an old wooden crate, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was the witness. I had to watch. The counting continued. 71, 67. The numbers felt wrong, unnatural. Counting backwards by primes was disorienting, breaking the normal rhythm of time. The darkness in the basement began to feel heavier, more substantial. The shadows thrown by my flashlight seemed to twitch and writhe at the edge of the beam. Mark reached 2. He fell silent. The quiet was absolute. It was a living thing, pressing in on my eardrums. I held my breath, listening. I could hear the blood pulsing in my head. I could hear the faint scuttling of what I hoped was a mouse in the far corner. Then I heard it, a soft, wet sound, like a damp sponge being dragged across concrete. Shh, thump, shh, thump. It was coming from the area where Sam had hidden. My flashlight beam trembled as I pointed it towards the sound. I saw nothing but the hulking shape of the furnace and the deeper darkness behind it. The dragging sound stopped. A new sound began, a low rhythmic clicking like two stones being tapped together. It was not Sam. My body was frozen, a statue of pure fear. I tried to call out, to scream Mark's name, to forfeit the game, but my vocal cords were paralyzed. From the darkness behind the furnace, a figure emerged. It was Sam. He was walking stiffly, his eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on Mark. He had a strange, lopsided smile on his face. He walked right past me, as if I weren't there, and stopped a few feet from Mark. "Found you," Sam said, but his voice was flat, a poor imitation of his own. Mark opened his eyes. He looked at Sam, and for the first time, I saw an emotion on his face. Not surprise, but a cold, calculating satisfaction. "The game is over," he said. The moment the words left his mouth, Sam blinked, shook his head, and the strange smile vanished. "Whoa," he muttered, looking around confused. "That was weird. I thought I heard something back there. Sounded like breathing." I stared at him, my mouth agape. The dragging sound, the clicking, the way he had walked. Had I imagined it? The fear had been so intense. Maybe my mind had played tricks on me. "See?" Sam said, clapping me on the back as we walked out into the blessedly normal night air. That was awesome, the adrenaline. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe it was just a game. But as we parted ways with Mark, he held my gaze for a second too long. "You witnessed," he said softly. It wasn't a question. The next game was a week later, at the old Miller place. This time, Sam was the seeker, I was the hider, and Mark was the witness. The Miller house was a labyrinth of packed, dusty rooms filled with the dead man. The week between the game at the Miller place and the one scheduled for Mark's house was the longest of my life. Fear had become a constant companion, a sour taste at the back of my throat, a cold knot in my stomach that never loosened. I slept with the lights on, startling at every creak of the house settling, every rustle of the oak tree outside my window. The memory of that pale, soil-dusted finger sliding through the closet door crack was seared onto the back of my eyelids. Sam, however, seemed to have shaken it off entirely, attributing my terror to an overactive imagination. Mark's calm explanation had worked on him. For me, Mark's calm was the most terrifying thing of all. The night of the third game, a thick, wet fog rolled into Cedar Fork, muffling sound and swallowing the streetlights in a hazy glow. It felt like the town was being wrapped in a funeral shroud. My parents were asleep, the blue light of the television flickering across their still forms. I met Sam and Mark at the edge of the woods that separated our street from Hemlock. Mark's house was a monstrous silhouette against the foggy sky, its gabled roof and widow's walk looking like the spires of a forgotten cathedral. "Ready?" Mark asked. His face was pale and serious in the gloom. "Born ready," Sam said, clapping me on the back. I flinched. My body was a live wire of anxiety. We didn't go through the front door. Mark led us around to a cellar door half-rotted and set into the ground at the side of the house. He pulled it open with a groan of protesting hinges, revealing a set of stone steps descending into absolute blackness. The smell that wafted out was of wet earth, decay, and something else, something sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit. "The heart of this house is in the root cellar," Mark said, his voice echoing slightly in the cramped space. "That's where we start." We filed down the steps. Mark produced an old oil-burning lantern, its light casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to cling to the walls. The root cellar was small, circular, and lined with empty, crumbling wooden shelves. The earth floor was packed hard. In the very center of the room was a single, straight-backed wooden chair. "The seeker sits here," Mark instructed, placing the lantern on the floor beside the chair. Its light barely reached the curved walls, leaving the ceiling overhead in pitch darkness. "The rules are the same, but here, the game is sharper. The hiding places are better." A chill that had nothing to do with the damp air crawled up my spine. Sam, for the first time, looked uneasy. The bravado had drained from his face, replaced by a wary tension. "Who's seeking?" Sam asked, his voice quieter than usual. "It's your turn, Sam," Mark said. It wasn't a suggestion. Sam swallowed hard and nodded. He sat in the chair, his posture rigid. Mark handed him a small, tarnished silver bell. "Ring this once, at the very end of your count, before you begin seeking. It lets the house know the game is beginning." Mark then looked at me. "Leo, you are the witness. You must find a place to observe. Remember Rule 4, no outside light." He pointed to a narrow, dark opening in the wall that I hadn't noticed, a small crawl space or a low passage. "That will do. You'll have a good view from there." I didn't want to go in there. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of this house, this town, to never look back. But Sam was already closing his eyes, steeling himself. I was trapped. I got on my hands and knees and crawled into the passage. It was a tight fit, barely wider than my shoulders, and it smelled strongly of that sweet, rotten smell. After about 10 feet, it opened into a slightly larger space, like a small alcove. From here, I had a perfect, albeit distant view of Sam sitting in the chair in the center of the root cellar, the lantern light painting his face in stark relief. Mark stood just outside the circle of light, a silent sentinel. Sam began to. Sam's count grew slower, more labored. 31, 29. He was struggling, as if the numbers themselves were a physical burden. Then, from the darkness somewhere beyond the root cellar, I heard the dragging sound. Shh, thump, shh, thump. It was back, and it was closer than ever before. Sam reached 2. He paused, a long, horrible silence stretching out. He fumbled for the bell and rang it once. The sound was thin and sharp, a needle of noise that seemed to pierce the veil of the house. The echo died, and the silence that followed was deeper, more profound, and infinitely more menacing. Sam stood up, his movements stiff. He picked up the lantern. Its light was weaker now, as if the darkness was drinking it. "Ready or not, here I come," he whispered, the words a dry rasp. He took a step forward, and the lantern flickered violently. In that strobing light, I saw it. Behind Sam, just at the edge of the darkness, stood a figure. It was tall and thin, a silhouette of sticks and shadows. Its head was too long, and it twitched to the side in a series of jerky, insectile motions. It was the source of the dragging sound, and it was following him. I tried to scream to warn him, but my voice was gone, stolen by the suffocating terror. I was the witness. I could only watch. Sam moved out of the root cellar and into a larger basement area, the thing gliding silently behind him, always just outside the lantern's reach. I crawled forward, keeping them in sight. The basement was a nightmare landscape of forgotten furniture, old tools, and shrouded shapes. Sam was methodical, checking behind barrels under a workbench. He was a good seeker, but he was seeking the wrong thing. He was looking for Mark. He didn't know he was being hunted himself. He stopped near a large old coal furnace. The dragging sound stopped with him. The tall, thin figure melted back into the deeper shadows. Sam stood still, listening. The only sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart. Then, from a pile of burlap sacks in the far corner, Mark's voice called out, soft and clear, "Over here, Sam." It was a perfect imitation. It sounded exactly like him. Sam's head snapped around. He raised the lantern and moved towards the pile of sacks, a triumphant smile on his face. "Got you!" He reached the sacks and pulled them aside. There was nothing there but dust and coal dust. The moment he realized his mistake, the atmosphere in the basement changed. The temperature plummeted. The sweet, rotten smell intensified, becoming a choking physical presence. The childish giggle echoed again, this time from directly above us. Sam spun around, the lantern swinging wildly. The light caught the tall figure, now standing directly in front of him. It wasn't a silhouette anymore. I could see its details, and I wished I couldn't. Its skin was the color and texture of old parchment, stretched taut over a frame of knobby, misaligned bones. It had no face, just a smooth, blank expanse where its features should be. And from its long, twig-like fingers, something dark and viscous dripped onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip. Sam froze, his mouth open in a silent scream. The lantern fell from his nerveless fingers and shattered on the concrete floor. The flame guttered and died, plunging us into absolute, impenetrable darkness. The last thing I heard was Sam's voice, but it wasn't his own. It was a wet, gurgling whisper, filled with a terror so absolute it transcended human understanding. "It's not hide and seek, it's tag, and I'm it." Then, the screaming started. It wasn't just Sam. It was a chorus of screams, layered over one another. Children, adults, all screaming in unison. A symphony of agony that seemed to come from the very walls of the house. I curled into a ball in my alcove, my hands clamped over my ears, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't know how long I lay there. Eventually, the screams faded, replaced by that same soft, dragging sound. Shh, thump, S.E.